Awesome. Well, first of all, thank all of you guys for coming today. We know we're a couple weeks into the semester and we're all getting our footing. We're really excited to kick off our first of 3 sessions on OERs. We know that acronym is being thrown around a lot at the college, but we're really hoping to provide some clarity for that of what it actually means, what it looks like, and how can we support you with the implementation of OERs. So today is the first session of 3 that we're going to be going over the next few weeks here in September and in October. My name is Jenna Cinnamon. I'm an instructional designer here at Stanton, and I have an awesome co-host today.
Hello, I'm Laura Thompson, and I'm also at Stanton as an instructional designer. You might also see Jenna and myself at various other campuses. This is our home, but we also go to lots of other places, and we're always available online to support you.
Thanks, Laura. So we're going to kick it off with a little bit of a guess a statistic activity. So all the statistics that we're going to go over have been reported by the U.S. Public Interest Group. The first statistic that we'd like you to guess, you can either come off mute or drop it in the chat, but blank % of students do not purchase required textbooks because of cost. What % of students do not purchase textbooks because of the cost? What are your thoughts? 37, 85, 30, 70. We have quite the gambit. 40, 50. This was pretty eye-opening. It is actually 30 to 65% of students reported that they do not buy the textbook due to its cost. Nice job, Kimberly. Right on the dot.
You got it.
So let's take a look at another. What % of students needed to work extra hours to afford the materials to attend college? So working those extra hours at night, on the weekends, 88%, 50, 35, 75, 75. I will say this one was not as high, to be transparent with you. This one was 25% of students said they needed to work extra hours to afford the materials. And when we think of materials, we're thinking of textbooks, lab-related items, and even the regular school supplies that they need in order to tackle their coursework with us. And the next one, what % of students skipped meals to be able to afford their textbooks and materials? Nita said 30, 30, 15, 25, 20, 20. You guys are pretty close. This one was 11%. I know this percentage isn't maybe as high as some of the others, but it's pretty eye-opening that individuals are making the choice between eating and their meals and the cost associated with attending their college and the materials they need to be supported. So students are continuing to struggle across the nation. It's not just a Delaware Tech, just a Delaware problem, but the costs associated with colleges do continue to rise, especially with the materials. We know that Delaware is in a unique situation, especially Delaware Tech with our Seed Plus scholarship. But that doesn't stop the additional costs that are associated with courses related to materials and textbooks.
So we'll go ahead today in this session. We're actually going to talk about open educational resources. What are OERs? We're going to also talk about Creative Commons licenses that are available for these materials that we need to pay attention to. Not quite as restrictive as copyright, but still something that we want to be respectful of. And what are these benefits of being able to use these materials, these open educational resources? We'll start off by talking about what are OERs. And this is the when, the how, the why. Love this picture. And really diving into having basically a conversation so that we're in a common place for how we see OERs. So OERs are freely accessible. They are openly licensed. and they come in diverse formats. So let's start off talking about them being freely accessible. And I like to also say, I like to kind of change that word to freely available, because accessible makes me think a little bit about accommodations and things like that too. And that's a whole nother thing that we'll evaluate with this. But they are freely available. They're available for our students, for us, and typically without cost. And this availability is really crucial so that we can help make sure that education is more equitable and inclusive for our students, and that they're able to get the materials that they need in order to learn. The second part is talking about how they're openly licensed. So we will talk more about the licensing. Jenna's going to talk about that part. But this open licensing allows you to use these materials. It also allows you to modify the materials, which is a really big deal. And you can share those materials easily without thinking again about some of the restrictions of copyright. You can adapt them to fit your specific teaching needs or the needs of your learners. And it can be so useful in your classrooms because of that freeness with which you can use them. And finally, there are many diverse formats, and we'll talk about even more about those formats. But if you're looking for textbooks or videos and articles, other types of resources, these help support providing material in a variety of means. And this flexibility helps you to choose materials to engage all of your students and to enhance their learning experience. So I told you we were going to talk about these types. So here we are. They come in various forms, and all of these are designed to help give you that support for your students. Textbooks. There are lots of courses, departments who are exploring the use of OERs, open educational resources, for textbooks as a cost-effective alternative to purchasing that $230 textbook. These can be adapted, these online textbooks can be adapted to fit course requirements, and they're usually free. Sometimes there's a low cost, but they tend to have some high quality educational content in them. Still, you as the expert in your course, make sure you review them to ensure that it's meeting the needs of your instruction and your students' learning, but the majority of them are very well done with several scholars contributing to the creation. You can also use articles. Now, I think that, and I know I've been guilty of this too, I think that as instructors, sometimes we find articles and we go, oh yeah, educational use, I can use whatever I want as often as I want. But unfortunately, maybe it was something that we had a subscription to a particular newspaper or to a particular magazine, and we think, oh, I can just provide that for my students. But if there's a cost, a subscription cost, we might not be able to readily provide that for our students. So that can be a problem. Or if it's an article that we had and it was okay for those single-use education things, but we put it into our course and we use it again and again and again and again, then we're kind of violating some of those rights too. Check with your librarians to really know if what you're doing violates copyright or not. The nice thing is in these OERs, when we're finding articles there, they're available and they support scholarly research, they're academic papers, they're freely accessed, and they can be incorporated into your course readings, and it helps you stay up to date with diverse perspectives. For instance, my dissertation, it's open resource, so people can access it instead of me putting a copyright on it. So those are the kinds of resources that are available. Several online journals also have open resource that you can use, or even published journals will have online versions of them that are open access. There are online courses out there that are already fully developed, but this is to supplement the traditional classroom learning. We aren't saying, here, take a course in a box and now give it to your students and say, there you go, and put your hands back, and no problem. These are things that maybe they exist in maybe a micro-credential, or they exist in some other types of learning modules that support what you're doing in your classroom that can provide your students with another way to learn the content. Their presentation slides. For instance, even this Canva, this was a template that Jenna artfully transformed into this presentation today. But you can find templates out there. The slides are already pre-made. I've used ones from Slides to Go also. So there are other resources where you can get some pre-made customizable presentations. There's supplementary materials, worksheets, handouts, so many things that are available online that can reinforce learning, giving students additional tools so that they can master that course content that you have. And of course, there are videos. We know that educational videos are so powerful. They help with visual or with auditory learning, and it gives explanations of complex concepts, and our students can access them at 4 in the morning if that's when they're awake. So it makes it really nice to help supplement the information that they're learning with you.
Thanks, Laura. And I think the most common relationship we form with the phrase OERs is with a textbook. But it does encompass all of these different types of materials that we can incorporate into our courses and into our lessons with our students. So it's nice to know that all of these are really out there. And now we're going to take a look about the different licenses so that you're familiar with how can you use it. And then we'll talk about next week, how do you give credit to it? So we're going to start with Creative Commons licenses. So how familiar are you with Creative Commons? Is this something that you've heard of before? What would you rate yourself? A 1, a 2, a 3? No idea, a little bit, or you know everything about it already? 2. Okay, a 2. 2. A 1. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. It was something I was not familiar with for many years. And it's such a great initiative that is so widespread. And now that you will get to be familiar with it, I think you'll start to pick up on it as you are accessing the internet and different resources yourself. So what is Creative Commons? It's actually a global nonprofit organization that really aims to make it easier for people all over the world to share knowledge and culture. They want to really address critical challenges and work towards a bigger, brighter future with open resources. Creative Commons, or CC, equips individuals and communities with necessary tools to enable sharing that serves the public good. The mission is to make knowledge and culture accessible and shareable. Creative Commons also advocates for ethical, inclusive, and purposeful sharing. They work to reshape the norms and policies within the open ecosystem to ensure that the sharing practices are equitable and beneficial for all. So this is different than copyright. There are still restrictions involved, but Creative Commons has done a really nice job setting the landscape and the industry norms for it. They support institutions in making knowledgeable and cultural assets accessible. We'll even talk about in future sessions about how you can contribute to this open infrastructure and not only just use it. So we're really excited to dive into this, and we're going to get to know a little bit more about the different licenses and the symbols that are associated with them. So Creative Commons is the CC. That is the main icon that's going to be on these open educational resources. Then on the right, there are 4 different types or restrictions to Creative Commons licenses. The first one is the person that shows, and it's CC BY. It means that you must give credit to the creator. So for example, I found an image and I would like to use it, and it says CC BY. That means I can use it, but underneath the image, I need to give credit to the creator. The next is share alike. So the little circle. So share alike is usually abbreviated with SA, and it means that you can adapt it even as well. So does BY, but you have to share it under the same terms. So for example, I take this image and it says CC BY share alike. I can edit it. I can change the colors of it. But then underneath of it, I'm going to give credit to the creator, and I'm also going to share it with the same license terms. So I can't sit there and say people can't make copies of it and make derivatives of their own. I have to keep that same licensure as the original. The last two are a little more restrictive. Non-commercial will say NC, and that means we can't use it commercially. Here at Delaware Tech, even if it has that non-commercial, it's something that we can still use in our courses. It just means that we can't develop something that has that license and sell it for a profit. And then finally, no derivatives, or ND. That is the most restrictive. Oftentimes I see the no derivatives with images or photos, art that individuals have created, because they don't want any alternate versions of that to be made. I can still use it. I can still include it in my courses. I'm going to give them credit, but I can't edit it at all. So there's different levels of Creative Commons licenses that you'll see on Open Educational Resources. So these are the 6 different logos or icons that you'll see when you look at Open Educational Resources, textbooks, articles, things of the sort. So starting at the top left is that CC BY. That is the least restrictive. It means everything's fair game, meaning I can edit it, I can sell it, I can copy and paste it how it is. However, I must always give credit to the original creator. The one underneath of it is a little more restrictive. It means that I can take this work or textbook, whatever it might be, I can edit it, I can sell it, I can do all of those things. But the problem is I have to also share alike. So for example, I'm going to put that it is CC BY share alike under my own work. I can't change that license to now say no more derivatives. My version is the final version. Going down to the third one, CC BY non-commercial. So that is still pretty open. I can copy and paste it. I can make edits to it. I can make it my own, but I can't sell the work. And now on the right-hand side, these are more restrictive items. CC BY, non-commercial share alike, CC BY, no derivatives, and CC BY, non-commercial and no derivatives. So it's almost a hierarchy of openness. All of these we can still use in our courses, whether it's in our LMS into D2L, in our lessons, in our presentations, but we have to be mindful the level of which we can edit it and the level of which we're sharing it. So we're going to take a look at a few examples of different open educational resources and their associated licenses. So this first one is OpenStax. We have many different departments across Delaware Tech leveraging OpenStax. Last year, I was involved in a build for Math 099, and we used OpenStax for a good chunk of our course content. So OpenStax is CC BY, non-commercial, share alike. So it means I could take content directly from that textbook, copy and paste it into my lessons and all my pages in D2L. I could edit it. I could add my own flair to it, but I can't sell my work. And I also have to share it under the same license. So when I would design these lessons in D2L, at the bottom of every page, I would have my creator information. I would give credit back to OpenStax. I would let them know where to find the original version. And I would also use the same CC BY non-commercial share alike. The next one is something that we use here in CCIT and also with many of our course builders and our SMEs when we go through the course design process. So OSCAR is a course design quality rubric. It's what we use to help guide our course design process to make sure we're meeting quality standards to provide quality online courses to our students. OSCAR is CC BY, meaning it's the least restrictive, and you can take that framework and kind of do anything with it that you'd like, but you have to still make sure you give credit to the original. So in CCIT, we took this original Oscar course design rubric and we've made it our own. One of our awesome IDs, I think he's here today too, Jason, he took Oscar and he put it into a Google Sheet for us to make it a little easier to comment on and be a little more dynamic. And he licensed it as well as CC BY so others could use it, but always gives credit back to Oscar at the bottom of it as well. And here's a little more restrictive item. This is an image from Flickr. So there are so many great images and graphics out there on the internet, and more and more artists are starting to use Creative Commons licenses. So this means that I can use this image. I can save it, I can copy and paste it, I can put it in my course. I'm going to give credit to the creator, but I can't make any derivatives of it. I'm not going to change it in any capacity. And that's very important to understand that non-derivative is that really strict version of Creative Commons, but it does not mean we cannot use it. We just can't edit it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jenna, for giving all that information about Creative Commons. There's so many icons and it was nice to have that overall description of them. We want to think about, now that we've been able to look at these licenses and recognize how we could possibly use them, we want to look at the benefits of using OERs. And you've heard some of these during this presentation already, but we want to just reiterate some of that today. But there is a question to ask you first. If your course uses a textbook, how much does it cost? Or if you have required materials, go ahead and you can put that in the chat or feel free to unmute just to say if you know, or if you're already using an OER, you can pop that in there too. I see a 185 and an OER for a course, 230 for a book. I know my son had just messaged me. He goes, Mom, I need a book. It's $225. And I said, okay, is this a paper version? Is it a digital version? You know, trying to think about all of these things. I see 110 and maybe some change, 130. So we do see that some of these books can be pricey, and especially if people are taking, I mean, I don't know. I was also explaining to my son what bookstores used to be like. Apparently, you go on and you order your book online through the bookstore, and then they will get it delivered to the bookstore and you can go pick it up, kind of like an Amazon kind of thing or something like that, a fulfillment center. They have to go get it from some central place. And I told him, I remember walking through the stacks of books, making sure you've got the right one, the right instructor, having your whole big stack of books with you, and walking up and paying my, I don't know, $1,000 or $700, whatever it was, and then finding out that my instructor only used one chapter anyway out of the whole $300 textbook. Those were interesting. And then I got savvy and I found used textbooks online. And I was so excited because I saved so much money. I got my used textbook, but I hadn't paid attention to the version of it. So the whole chapter that instructor decided to spend the most time on was what I didn't have in my edition of the book. So saved all that money and then didn't have the materials anyway. So here we go. We do have $30 in there also. So we do see there's a nice range there. I just wanted to, we had put this slide back in here to help us remember, particularly for me, it's at 11%. And I understand that, I mean, we say, oh, 11 out of 65%, 25, it's the lowest, but still thinking about people who are making choices between eating and choices between their textbooks. That is one reason that we want to think about these materials that are lower cost and more easily available to our students. And this is some information that we have that at many community colleges, the cost of books per year exceeds the cost of tuition. Now we can especially think about that here at Delaware Tech. We have many students who are able to take advantage of the SEED program, so they're not paying tuition. But there's so many other costs that are involved in going to college. One of those is books, that we still find that there's budget that the students have to think about in order to pursue their college education. And these are one of the things that we can remove or reduce by using these open educational resources. So here's three things again, to be able to think about 3 reasons why we would do it. We've talked about the cost saving reason already, that the biggest advantage is that they can eliminate the cost of textbooks and materials, or it can at least significantly reduce the expenses for students and help them manage their budgets and help them be able to afford this education. The one thing that we talked about a little bit with that CC BY or with the licensing is that there's customization and flexibility. One of the great things about the OERs is that it offers flexibility for you as an educator. You can adapt and modify almost all of those resources so that it specifically fits the needs of your course. You can make it tailored to your cohort of students, and you can make their learning experiences more effective then. Some of the things that Jenna and I had talked about also was the fact that you can have a more up-to-date resource than a static textbook. So when we would go in and I told you, I paid that money for my textbook, then if there was a new edition that came out, we needed to do a new adoption for the textbook for the new edition. Many of these OERs are dynamically updated, which means they update the source at the link. So we still use the same link to get to the resource, but now we're going to have the updated version for many of them. And there's increased access and equity. So by providing these free and easily available educational materials, OERs can bridge the gaps in education and can help make sure that all learners, regardless of their financial situation, get access to these high quality content materials and to help them be successful. But I'll tell you, this made me think about it because in other lunch and learns that I had done before, for instance, one with Carrie Ann before, we talked about how many students access their education on their phone. Now, I know I'm old, so that's my problem with reading on a little bitty phone screen, reading my textbook on a phone screen, but maybe there's other people who don't really want to read it online. They want to be able to have a printed copy. As you saw in the example slide that Jenna had on here for the accounting one, there was a little link so you could buy a printed copy of the book. Also, the majority of them come in some kind of a PDF so that you can print it yourself. You can buy a printed book that's bound for you, usually for fairly low cost, if that's what you want to do. But I talked to the librarian here at Stanton also. And because I had seen at the library OER books that were available for students to check out. And the way that you would do that is you would send the file to your printing office. For us, it's Gale. You'd send it in to the printing office. They print it. Oh, and we have Netta here too. So if you have anything you want to chime in about this, and catch me if I miss a step, let me know. And then if you get that printed, then you can give it to the library, and the library will hold it as a reserve copy so the students can check it out of the library. I also found out from Alice today, and she had mentioned it before, but I didn't think about it in this context, there's free printing in the library. So if your students, they don't have a printer at home, they don't have paper, ink, whatever it is, they can come on campus to be able to print their textbook as well here. So there's different things. I see Netta unmuted. What would you like to add?
They can also scan it and send themselves a file. I believe it's 2 chapters at a time for copyright, unless you do, like you said, the OER and keep the whole book on reserve.
Oh, you mean if there's a textbook, if they wanted to try to make a digital copy of that?
Mhm.
Okay, all right,
Or
okay,
print.
that they can check out from the library or
They're
you.
usually on reserve, but yeah, they could, and which means they are only able to use them for a limited amount of time in the library, but they could take the book and make photocopies of a chapter or two or scan.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you for adding that. Because it just made me start to think about when I think about that word equity, or I think about the words available or accessible, it made me want to think about that whole picture. So there are options that we can offer our students, and that made me very happy. So let's think about this. We've just had great discussions about OERs. After all of this information, how do you feel about OERs now? So think of maybe your adjective that describes someone in this picture. You can pop it into the chat. Feel free to unmute You can also say yellow, tan, orange, red, however is easier for you, about how you feel about OERs. Tan, happy. I'm thinking that's happy. Between tan and yellow, kind of questioning about it. I feel pretty happy about it. Oh, red, yeah, rock on. It's gonna be a party. Got another tan. I'm interpreting tan as OERs are a good idea. I'm interested. I'm excited about this. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And and Kim said that my interpretation was pretty close to what she was thinking. Thank you for that.
And I think everyone makes a good point about here. It does take some research to find OERs, just like when we vet textbooks and other resources. It's the same lift in that aspect, and we really can use more diverse resources. We're not focused in on just one publisher or one perspective. When we use OERs in our courses, we can really mix and match to make it unique to our college, our students, our syllabi, and our courses. So we do know that there is some research involved in this, and we have a lot of upcoming sessions about locating these and how do you find them? How do you vet them? And we're really excited to dive into those over the next few weeks.
Oh, and Jenna, can I add one thing also?
Yeah.
The one that I saw on Alice's desk today was a PHL, but what it was a compilation of all of the OER materials that they had used. So it wasn't necessarily just a textbook. It was the readings, it was other resources that they had that were available for the students, but put into one handy dandy resource at the library for them. So that's another way to look at it, that it's not just let's take a textbook and now we'll print it. It could be all of those resources that you put together that, as Celeste indicated, it does take some research to build that. But hopefully you can see how the benefits of this research can really be useful for you and for your students. Thank you so much for coming.